Man, done that a couple times now. Good morning, everybody. It is February, although it looks like March, right? I got my all of my green on today. Well, for some reason, I just had well, that's a little older T-shirt there, but this is it's a fun run that they do every St. Patrick's Day, and I've done it for a couple of years. So I just want a little long sleeve T-shirt on today. Put this on. I said, well, where's my green cap here? I'm sporting the new Real Estate Without Renters branding on my Shamrock caps there, my lucky caps. So looking good, but we got to get through what we say, Valentine's Day coming up, right?
Valentine's Day. Yes, yes.
Indeed. So that's the next one, and oh, I guess we could tie in a topic there. I I wanted to talk about. I've done some research. I got some live presentations that I did. I've got some more live presentations coming up, and sometimes it's the same similar group or something like that that I've spoken with before. So I always like to update not only my case studies, but anything's of relevance. And I get a lot of questions on non-performing notes still. And there's still some chatter in our industry about that. And I'm always puzzled by how many people who teach this in the industry, and there's not that many, but they just get this wrong or it's over exaggerated and they keep saying, oh, just wait, just wait, just wait. Been hearing that for 5 years, everybody. I mean, all that, all the talk about, oh, just keep money on the side. We're going to have a big, and I'm like, that's not what it's shaping up to. But that comes with deep research, and that's the thing. And Dwayne, for God, how many years was I doing just deep research on all kinds of topics on notes and the non-performing and
Yeah, for a long time. I mean, as long
yeah,
as I've known you, you are always the research guy that was, and everybody talks about it. Wow, Kevin goes so deep into the research, and I say he's definitely the research guy. Um, that not only talks about different trends, but things have happened in the past and things that are swinging around and what's relevant in today's market. So, yeah, I was. It's funny that you say non-performing. I had a call yesterday with a guy, and he is through another trainer, somebody that we know up north,
hmm
and hey, they're having me do a bunch of direct mail marketing and uh, spending a bunch of money in marketing and sending out envelopes and
sure,
flyers and all this stuff and looking for non-performing. But daggone, spent a lot of time not finding any non-performing. And I said, you're not.
yeah, I got the
Somebody if
same thing.
somebody's pitching that to you, you have the wrong instructor.
Yeah,
Nothing wrong
that's
with that person.
yeah.
Just saying they're a little behind times right now.
Yeah, just not seeing where things are going. And when you start to get into the charts and graphs and you start looking at the New York Fed reports and things like that, I mean that's where you really see the details of what's going on. And we've said for a long time in a typical market, indicators for mortgage delinquencies are always credit card debt and automobile debt. And then the last domino is usually mortgages. But again, there's different trends in different times on what that is. So, the non-performing side of thing, everything that I've seen is still too expensive. And part of that is because inventory levels are low. And a lot of the bigger investors who buy these things in bulk are overpaying, quite frankly,
Yeah.
and thinking they can turn around and sell these things to the market. And they're successful to a degree because there's a lot of people who just don't know any better and they don't know how to run the numbers on non-performing notes because after all, I mean, we haven't seen a flood of non-performing notes since probably it was 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, so it's been quite some time. And you've had people buying performing notes. And if you try to use the same metrics for performing notes and non-performing notes, you're going to have an issue. You're going to have a problem. You're going to lose money. You're taking on way too much risk. And these bigger sellers have to make their margins, so when they look at these numbers and they're putting them out there, they're pricing them at a point where if you know what you're doing, you simply can't make it. Think about it this way. It's almost like when you're renovating a house. If you're paying too much for that house, eventually the cost of fixing it up, getting it on the marketplace, selling the property becomes too much, and your profit margins get razor thin or worse. You're in a position where you're starting to go, how much money can I afford to lose to get out of this deal? And you
Yeah.
just never want to put yourself in that position. So please do not apply the thought process and same numbers and same ratios that we use in the performing world to the non-performing world. It's just they're two completely different things. So let's start with that topic then of what's going on really with the debt and take a deeper dive into this. So you're gonna learn a lot in this, and I didn't have time to put color on these. I didn't have time to put automations in this PowerPoint slide. It's a building process that I'm putting together for some presentations, but you'll see what I mean as we hit it here. So let me share my screen and talk about this. What's going on right now, 2026? Well, we got credit cards, we got auto, those are both struggling. We've got mortgages holding strong. Why? That's the different dynamic. It's always typically followed credit cards, auto. Once those delinquency rates get up, mortgages start to happen. Why is that not happening to the degree that would be expected right now? Are we seeing a little increase in mortgages? Yes. Guess where? On what used to be called subprime. Okay, that's on the FHA loans. If you look at the conventional loans, versus FHA delinquencies are much higher. Why? Because they go to a less qualified borrower. That's pretty darn simple and straightforward. So let's take a deeper dive into this. So we're going to talk about the overall debt, credit card debts, auto loans, mortgages, and then why the difference, and then why there's some warning signs for low income areas. And I want to emphasize that low income areas because a lot of the seller finance notes that we end up buying are not in high end areas. They're in middle class to upper lower class homes in the most affordable areas. I mean, when you look at it, where is most seller financing take place? In affordable housing. Whatever that means in your state, whatever that means in your area, that's what it pertains to. That's also why in our industry that you'll see a large proportion of notes that are in the Midwest, okay, that are in the southeast. That's why you see that. Why? Because there's more affordable housing in that area, and that's where investors sell to people. That's where seller financing fills a void. I mean, in some of these areas, people got loans for $50,000, $60,000 to buy a 2 or 3 bedroom house somewhere in Texas or Ohio or Indiana. And I know I know for some people, in California, watching and listening to this, or go, you couldn't get any. I know. That's my whole point. You find housing in those areas, 50, 60, $70,000 to buy a house. Guess what? Banks will not loan less than $80,000 in almost all cases. Why? Because with the new banking rules, back for the Dodd-Frank era, they can't make any money. Dodd-Frank limited how much money banks could make, and it's based upon the amount that they lend. Okay, so when the banks started adding all their numbers and going, well, wait a minute, it costs us X amount of dollars to originate a loan just for the employees, just for the offices, the branches. They took all things in consideration and said, here's what it costs us for a, a loan. And then they said, well, for us to at least break even, we have to do at least an $80,000 loan because the points and stuff that we can charge break us out even for what our cost is. Okay. So where do people like that buy a house? Seller financing. Okay. So it all falls into place here. So let's look at the bigger picture. U.S. debt. I know there's a lot on here. I'll probably trim this up, but 18.8 trillion. I mean, yes, our debt is still going up. But the point being here in this bigger picture, what's the biggest part of this overall debt? And by far, as you can see, it's mortgages. So that's why when something happens in the mortgage industry, it makes big news because that is a huge 70% part of this whole pie of the mortgage of debt in the US. So if you look at mortgages there in the dark blue, by far the absolute biggest on here, right? Credit card debt is only 5%. Auto debt's double that, 10%. Student loans even higher than that. So why are these indicators typically the ones that show what's happening in mortgage debt? Because of reasons that we're going to get to, of course. So mortgage debt is the biggest part of this. Credit card 1.28 trillion, auto loans 1.67, and student loans about 9% of the total at 1.66. And that's from the Fed report fourth quarter 2025, which is the latest report that I can find. So those numbers may end up changing. So if you see it in the news in another quarter, hey, well, it's higher than that. I get it. These are the latest numbers that we can work with, right? I love it when I get that. Well, you said it was
Hey,
only this.
you're off by 100,000.
Yeah, the numbers. I say, yeah, yeah, they change. Yes, I
You're
get
off
it.
on your numbers. Yeah.
So this is what we're working on here, the last report. So that's what it is. And the credit card is the initial pain point for most people. Why? Because, let's face it, credit cards can be pretty easy to get, regardless of income levels. There's ways that even lower income people can get credit cards. Their banks are, pretty easier with credit cards because the interest rates were absolutely ridiculous. And of course, one of the reasons the current administration is looking to cap those interest rate at 10%. I mean, banks somehow get around these usury laws, it seems, where they're charging 20, 24% from people.
30%. Yeah.
And they tease you with 0% interest for the first year, for the first months. Get your card, buy everything, buy now, pay later. It's super simple. And what happens? We get we get people who end up taking on more debt that they can handle. So high interest rates are a problem. That's being looked at legislatively. I'm not sure when that starts, the 10% cap or anything like that. I saw that that's in there. I don't carry credit card debt myself. I pay it every month. But for those who do, be careful of those rates. I mean, that'll just be a huge pain point for you later on, even at 10%. But it does hit lower and middle income houses a little bit harder because they have a tendency to carry the balance on those loans versus pay them off in full every month. And when you do that, I mean, the next thing you know, people who took on a little bit of debt just by, oh, I don't know, buying some appliances, things for the house, whatever it is, what they're spending the money on, all of a sudden they can't pay the full balance, and you start to run the numbers, and at the current rates, it might take somebody now 5, 6, 7 years to pay that debt off, and that puts them behind on everything else. So as a result, the serious delinquencies, which is at least 3 months late, have elevated to almost 12.5%. 7 to 12.5%. So if we go on the high end, 12%. That's a lot. If that was translated, by the way, into the mortgage industry, oh my God, we'd be in a rough time. It hit around 10% of all mortgages were serious delinquent at one point in time at the peak of 2008 or 9. And I mean, what was happening? The sky was falling. It was crazy because it's credit card, smaller balances affecting certain groups with no collateral, that sort of thing. Not as big as an impact, but that's why it's an indicator. If they're having trouble paying this, or are they using their card to pay mortgage payments? One of the things I look at when I look at payment histories, if somebody's paying with a credit card, you start to think, oh, well, maybe they're doing it for the points. Okay. you know, and I get that, but not if it's a mortgage that's only $300, $400 a month. I just don't think that's the case. If it's a lower middle income household and they're paying by credit card, it's an indicator there's probably a little issue going on there. And how long can they keep that up? So this is what we're looking at on the credit card side. So that's not good. But again, it's not quite translating into mortgage debt. So you can see here at the peak of 2008 and 9, you had this huge ramp up from 2006 all the way up to 2008. And when that happened, of course, people were spending, they were trying to save their house, and people were spending money on the credit card, trying to keep the mortgage, keep the house, that sort of thing. And we had this huge run up. And don't forget, we also had adjustable interest rate loans at that point in time. So people's mortgage payments started capturing more and more of their monthly income, just started eating it up, where people didn't have enough money for other things, started using the card. So it's just a combination of these things that really ran this up. And then, of course, we had the big fall on that, and now we're starting to see the growth. So, yeah, it's still down here. I think there's some indicators that it may be up here at this point in time on preliminary reports for the next Fed report. So, yeah, we probably do expect that to increase up here. So, not at historical highs, but if we start getting back into this territory here, that's definitely sending a different signal for us. It's on the rise, but it was, coming down from a low here. Okay, so not Panicville, just yet. So that's a little different than what we saw in the ramp up from the last one. Okay, we're in two dramatically different spots here, everybody. So yes, it's up, but why aren't mortgages being affected? That's really kind of one reason. Auto loans also under obviously some serious pressure. 1.67 trillion. I think the average mortgage, or sorry, average auto loan now was what, 800 something a month,
Yeah, it's high.
right? 800, 900 a month, I think, something like that.
Yeah.
I know that's where mine was, and I think I got a 4-year loan on that, and I just paid that off in 2 years, even though it was at 4%. I was just like, 800 something dollars a month, for a car payment, just crazy. But that's where we are. And
Hmm.
the auto dealers make it easy to finance. In fact, auto dealers don't like you to pay cash.
No, they make their money on the interest.
100%. If you're going to buy an automobile, everybody, don't go in there armed with cash and well, you can go in there armed with cash, but don't tell them up front you're paying cash. You will get a whole different price on your car because they're making their money on the financing. I mean, what do you think carries Ford and all these other companies? Ford Financial's a strong, they do it on the loans.
Of
And
course.
that's where they're making their money. So the 60-day lates there, they're considering seriously delinquent near 15-year highs. Okay, so that is definitely higher. And again, I think the reason is auto prices are higher. They're a lot safer today. Safety comes with a price, everybody. When they put regulations in there saying you have to have this, you have to have this, you have to have this in these automobiles, the price goes up. When you have to have this for energy, which I think they're getting rid of, that auto stop thing, that was put into law. I hate that. You ever drive those vehicles? Every once in a while, I get a rental car and it has that you stop at a stop sign or a red light, the engine shuts off.
Yeah, I don't understand. I know that why they have it, but what people don't realize, and my understanding is that there's a switch on there that you can turn it off
Yeah,
in the car. But think about it, starting on and off all the time. That starter at some point's got to wear out.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I
Yeah,
think
it's
it's the
causing
craziest
causes
thing. That
problems. It's
yeah,
so irritating.
it is.
If you're in hot weather like we are here in Florida, and all of a sudden you're like stop, you're like, what the off? Air turns down. It's like, come on. So I think they're getting rid of that. But safety features or environmental features, like it or not, they do add cost to vehicles, and that's one of the other reasons you're seeing the cost go up on these vehicles. And with that, and they make the financing easy. And when that happens, we find delinquencies. That's just naturally going to happen there. So, yep, high vehicle prices, insurance. What's happened to insurance on automobiles? Everywhere,
Crazy.
gone up.
Crazy.
Because the vehicles are more expensive, people can't afford 2, 3 year loans anymore. So, well, they just stretch it out. And that was happening and is happening in the mortgage business right now. We see 50, 60-year loan modifications all the time. And even they've been talking earlier this year, earlier last year, about doing 50-year loans for people. And some people were screaming 50 years, so you're never out of debt and all that. And that's one side of the argument. The other side is your payment's going to be lower, and hopefully you build equity and you can cash out of that at any point. But I'm sitting there in the background going, I just looked at a tape with 30 or 40 bank modified loans that were 50 to 60 years. And that's on
No
top of the
kidding.
person already being in it for 10 years.
That's
So
incredible.
they're already there. So the vehicle industry had to do the same thing. Let's just stretch it out. People are paying longer, and of course that's in favor of the lender. So delinquencies are starting to happen. That becomes a serious issue. So, what about mortgage debt? Why aren't we seeing then that last domino fall? It is kind of like an outlier in this case because it's breaking trends that we have seen in the past. So, huge balance as we established already, big part of the overall economy, $13.17 trillion. The delinquency rate is 1.4%, still at historical lows.
Mm,
Okay. Now it's up, as you can see, from other levels. And, so we're not where the crisis was, but, um, across, that's not a lot, it's a small amount, it's a manageable amount. And that's why we're not seeing a lot of non-performing notes in the note investing business. It's just not there. And you got to remember too, when these loans were going seriously delinquent, the government again overreacted and they started this whole program with COVID. And they said if anybody asks for a loan modification, you have to give it to them. That's essentially what the federal government told the banks. So, guess what people were doing? They saw that loophole and they just
mhm,
asked for modification after modification after modification, and they were granted, granted, granted. And that's why we ended up with people with 50 to 60-year loans on balances that they'll never end up repaying. They just went from one bank to another and got a loan mod every single time. And of course, the COVID thing went on until last year. They just kept it going. It was absolutely ridiculous. So, was there some abuse in the system? 100%. I've looked at these notes, people. I've looked at they eventually come out of the banking system at some point in time, and then they end up being bought by some bigger companies. One of which I went through their tape, I looked at documentation, and that's exactly what happened. Exact
mm,
100%. You could see exactly what happened. This person would go delinquent. They would get modified. They make a couple payments. They stop making payments again. Year goes by, do the same thing again, and they did that year after year after year, to the point where people on that one tape, I'm using that as my sample, 6 years they hadn't made a payment, 5 years they hadn't made a payment, didn't have to. They're still in their house, still going because, hey, we get rewarded by not paying the loan because we have extra money and we're still here. And then banks just come to us and say, well, what can we do to modify your loan to help you with make your payments lower? So why would some of these people start paying when they're like, it's better if I don't. I'm going to get better rates. I'll be able to save up some money or take vacations, whatever the heck I'm going to do, because the banks are always going to come back. And if I ask for a loan mod, by law, they have to give me one. Ridiculous. Probably an unintended consequence, I hope. But that's exactly what was happening here. So there, it is an outlier. We're just not seeing that. Now, there's some other reasons I'm going to go into, okay, of why we're not seeing it here. But the other part of this debt equation, so we're looking at, again, the credit card debt, the automobile debt, mortgage debt, and the other one you saw in there was student loan debt. Okay. So there we go. Student loan debt is just starting to hit. Um, Again, it's close to where the auto loans are as far as dollar amount. 90 days plus delinquent is 9.6%, so it's definitely elevated. But the rate of that transitioning to even a higher uh, delinquency rate is accelerating. So why is it rising? Well, again, this made the news, so this shouldn't be anything new. For a while there, they just said you're not going to ever have to pay that debt. And some people's debt was forgiven. Other people's were not, but they were paused. They didn't have to make payments, and part of this was COVID and everything else. And I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong. I'm just telling that's what happened. But there's also, a problem. I think a lot of people with student debt who are now getting a little bit older, by the way, and find out that, oh, your debt wasn't canceled. You have to pay that debt. And then they're getting conflicting news. Well, do I or don't I? Might it be forgiven again in the future? Why pay now if, somebody else is going to come in and forgive that debt? Why did my debt not get forgiven when all these other people did? So I think there's a lot of uncertainty in that debt, and that debt can't go away. You can't bankrupt it away unless Congress changes the law. You can't do that. Um, it's this money is owed to the federal government for the most part, by the way, but they start to sell that stuff off to debt collectors and everything else. So a lot of people are going to be in for some hard times with the student debt. They took on a heck of a lot of debt, which I guess student debt you could have paid for housing and books or personal use, I guess. And so some people got themselves in a situation. They've got a lot more debt than they can afford from the job that they ended up getting after college. But it's not secured debt. It's not like you're losing your house. So if you're going to be delinquent somewhere, that's again where people have to choose. Here's how much money I have. I want to keep my house first. So sorry, student debt, you're not getting paid. Um, Sorry, credit cards, you're not getting paid. I do want to keep my car. I don't want that repoed. So I'm going to try to make that payment. So, that's why, these things come in priority. Student debt, credit card debt, those are the first to go. And then we have the automobiles because that is secured by the car. People don't want to lose their car. And then, you end up with mortgages going on. So that's typically how it goes. So really, just in oops, I forgot to put student loans on here. See, I'm still working on this one. So student loans, let me add. Oh, I got to take it out of this mode. Sorry. I'll fix that later. I meant to add student loans in there as well. So credit cards high, automobiles elevated, especially in the subprime, student loan debt, real big chart going up there because now people are understanding they have to pay that debt off. So a huge rise in student debt and mortgages rising, but still historically low overall. So why? Let's get in some reasons here. After the last crash, you saw the chart on that. The laws after the crash 2008 became stronger. Why? Because banks were doing loose loans. There was absolutely 100%. I owned part of a mortgage company at the time, and I didn't work there. Every once in a while, I'd go in and say hi, but I had a financial interest in it. And I saw some of the loans that people were writing and getting done. And I'm just sitting there shaking my head like, well, God, man, really? No doc, stated income loan, and they're getting the money to buy this kind of house. It was absolutely mind blowing because the rules were a lot easier there. So since that crash, the reaction was make it harder. Dodd-Frank Act put a lot of stop to that. But I thought this was interesting. The median credit score for new mortgages is greater than 750.
Hmm.
Now that's for more conventional type of loans. Riskier borrowers go to the FHA. So FHA, for those who don't know, FHA insures loans for lenders. VA guarantees loans, Veterans Administration. So FHA is really an insurance that we all pay for, taxpayers, because it's government money. And they go to the banks and say, well, give these people with less than a 750 score, give them a loan because they're showing income wise, they should be able to afford it. And that used to be capped at 40% debt to income, and now it's 55% debt to income, meaning half of
Wow.
somebody's money can still go to their mortgage and get approved by FHA. So even FHA, after these rules were created, started making it easier and easier for people to borrow. So again, guess where the highest delinquency is when you break out all of the various type of loans? It's FHA. There's no question. Why? Because they're taking on riskier borrowers. Simple. Because they're allowing debt to income ratios to go to over half, which they couldn't do back then. Credit cards, subprime loans are much easier to get, as we said. So it's more challenging to get a traditional loan, which again opens up other financing alternatives such as seller financing. So where do we find seller financing? Same place the government finds riskier borrowers. That's it. Okay. So is seller financing, do we see loans in seller financing that those people couldn't get qualified for a bank loan? Of course. That's why they're getting seller financing. No question. But remember, we have the advantage when we're looking at these loans. okay, this person couldn't get a bank loan because maybe they didn't have the best credit. Maybe they had no credit. Maybe they didn't have much of a down payment, but they've been in there since 2012. And I can see their track record of paying. Their mortgage payment is less than what the rent is by at least half. Where are they going? So there's other circumstances on why these notes are so attractive. It's just they couldn't fit into the bank model. Okay, that's fine. A lot of people can't. That's why the government steps in and does insurance like this. So that's what we have. So much tighter underwriting on this, but still stricter than seller financing, of course. Seller financing, the only threshold, by the way, is can they afford it? So we look at the same type of debt to income ratio that FHA does, 40, 50%, and that's about where we max out. So we're doing the same thing as that. Huge home equity cushion. I think this is a big one, right? You've got people who purchase homes coming out of the crash 2012, 13, 14, 15, and property values have gone up pretty darn consistently since then. And they've got some substantial equity. That means they don't want to lose the equity, but they also have options if things get really bad, which is they could sell the property, they could probably refinance, they could get a home equity line of credit because they have equity within it. So when you have other options like that and things get difficult financially, then you can tap into those other options. And hence, we're not going to see what? More delinquencies because they have options. I mean, Dwayne, you remember in the 2008 crash, you had people, I don't know if you were in Florida at the time or Carolina, but in Florida, people's property values get cut in half.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I was still in Florida then. Crazy. I mean, you, you can't believe of where they were at and then being able to cut that payment in half. It was you see it all the time. And Florida was a big proponent. I mean, a big area for that happening throughout the country.
Yeah, we used to. I remember even making kind of a little joke about it's Florida's underwater, and
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
people owed more on their home than it was worth, to the point where a lot of people threw up their hands and go, well, my $200,000 house that I owe 190 grand on is only worth 100,000. Why am I even paying? I'll
That's right.
never capture that equity again on that, so there was a very negative kind of outlook on things. And those non-performing loans just started to grow and grow and grow and grow. Here, we're in a different situation. And this is another reason why we're not seeing that final domino fall. It's completely different. These time around, they have equity. And you heard this administration saying, we're not taking action to drop equity down and change the marketplace at all. So why? Well, this is the reason. If people start losing equity, they start losing options on what they can do if things get more difficult, and then we would see why. We would see delinquencies go up. So with these loans, of course, there's collateral. And the collateral is the house, and the house goes up in value versus automobiles where you get a depreciating asset, right? And then credit cards, of course, you have zero collateral. So with these home equity loans, when you've got that cushion, man, that changes. It gives people more options, and that's another big reason why we're not seeing these. Here's another one. Again, the priorities and loan structure. We talked about this already, so I'll go through it quickly here, but people pay the mortgage first. Like when you have a certain amount of money, let's say let's just say you got paid once a month. And you go, here's the money we have for the month. What are you going to do? You're going to start to prioritize your bills if you can't afford everything. So, well, let's keep a roof over our head first. Fine. Let's protect the equity that we have on our property first. You know, we don't want to lose our housing where we're paying $600 a month and rent is $1,500 a month. Pay the mortgage first. All these reasons on why they don't, why they structure it that way. We do have a lot more fixed rate mortgages. One of the big things that we had back in the lead up to the crash in 2008 was those adjustable rate mortgages. They were subprime, adjustable rate, and people's mortgage payments were a 10, 11%. I mean, it was getting up there, and their payments were going up every single time, the interest rate changed. And again, it became less predictable. So a lot of people just said, I can't even afford this. When I started, it was low, but now it's my payments doubled. You know, it's I hate to compare it to the insurance, but I don't know, Dwayne, if you're no longer in Florida, but if you've seen what's going on in insurance rates in Florida, especially condos, oh my God, our condo market was getting devastated because people's insurance, property insurance has doubled, tripled to a point where they can't afford it. HOAs have gone up because they have to do all the special testing and all the certain stuff on buildings, so it's a mess, but when you have mortgage rates that are also adjustable that can jump up on you like that, it causes a problem. Most of the rates that we see today, of course, are fixed rates, so it's a little bit more predictable. That's another reason. And then we've got uh, foreclosure processes, right? I mean, people don't want to go through foreclosure at all. They understand, the chances are with the last crash, they knew somebody, a relative, a friend, somebody who went through foreclosure, and they don't want to go through that process. So they pay the mortgage first. That is also keeping this afloat. K-shaped warning sign. So you'll hear economists and such talk about this K-shaped warning sign here. And what this shows is there's been a large divide in the recovery since COVID. Higher income homeowners, largely insulated. They've got more money, they've got more income, they have more equity in their homes. And then lower middle income jobs, not as much. So here's what they're talking about on this. You can see before COVID, 19, and then we had this economic recession with COVID. And so how have we been recovering from this? And the recovery, as you can see here, is technology, retail, software services, things like that have recovered pretty darn well. It's back up to pre-recession days here, so it's been a long road. The time frame has been longer on the recovery here, but it's back. But look what's happened to all these other ones. The travel industry, entertainment, hospitality, food services. I mean, I'm here in Orlando. Our whole Orlando economy is drastically affected by those industries, right? We've got Disney, we've got Epcot, we've got SeaWorld, we've got all these theme parks and all the hospitality and hotels and everything that goes around with that in the travel industry and the food service industries. And you can see that recovery not doing good. And
Mm.
that's what they're talking about, that K-shaped recovery. So think about all the people who are in the hospitality industry, in the food service industry. Um, they're having a little harder time. And where do those people typically live? If not apartment complexes, they live in affordable housing, and if they're on a regular mortgage, and their jobs at risk all the time and they're low paying jobs because let's face it, if these companies haven't recovered well, they're not unless they're specifically told by the government to pay more money like they did in California. And what's happened in California, the layoffs in the food service
Oh,
industry have been massive. Gee, I wonder why. Because you're making small businesses or medium or size businesses uh, it's unaffordable for them. They can't afford the cost of labor. So yeah, there's fewer people making 20 bucks an hour, but you also had to lay off a bunch of people to get there, So unless the government's forced, they can't afford to do that, especially, and then you got the prices, right? God, what was I the other day? I don't know, something like Chipotle or something like that. And you start to look at that and you're like, geez, I could be at a sit down restaurant, full service restaurant for what I'm paying for that
yeah, it's
for a
ridiculous.
burrito. It's like, wow, what the heck is going on? So a lot less people are going, and therefore, you've got some struggles in industries such as this. So that is a part of this role as well. All right, so wrapping things up here, what does that mean for everyday people. So yes, there is some economic stress out there, especially lower middle income in certain services and such, for well. But again, the mortgage market still relatively good spot for reasons that I outlined for you. And I don't see things aligning where that's going to change. I think it's going to remain an outlier. I'm optimistic, about recovery and less government regulations and things like that. I think it'll accelerate businesses once the government gets out of the way and let people do their thing. I've always believed that. But that's just my personal opinion. But I don't see anything in the immediate future that's going to change what we just saw. I think mortgages are going to stay the same. And the good news about that is, everybody, if you're buying performing notes, guess what? We're going to continue to have good performing notes for all the reasons that
Hmm.
I outlined before.
Yep.
Non-performing notes, just not going to see them. And well, you'll see some, okay? But you better know how to do your due diligence. I'm telling you right now, if you don't know on a deep level how to do your due diligence on a non-performing loan, you will get burned because you're going to underestimate what it's going to cost you to fix that loan. You're going to underestimate it in time. You're going to underestimate it in money. And that's what's going to catch up to you if you don't know how to buy right. Performing notes, a little easier. You're buying something that, well, is performing. And then there's an inclination for that to continue to perform. Again, there's due diligence behind all of that, but there's an easier way to speculate, if you will, or take an educated guess based upon this person has been paying for 10 years and look at their performance history based upon the fact that their mortgage payment with taxes and insurance is $700 a month versus rent, based upon the fact that they've got $80,000 in equity, they only owe 30 grand on this $120,000 house, they're going to stay and pay. So we have all of those things working in our favor with this in the mortgage market. If the economy softens, yeah, could mortgages end up, uh, could that end up changing? Sure, but there's always that risk. So, um, if people are juggling debts, they'll make those solutions, and that's where the bright side again, I think, is the loans that we're buying, especially ones that are well seasoned, they were created years ago. And it gave people that opportunity to build up that equity, to keep their payments low, and fixed versus what rent is or what current mortgage payments are somewhere else. And again, they're going to stay and pay, for all those reasons. And so I just don't see non-performing notes on the horizon still,
Yeah.
at all. So that's my research on the topic, and that might be counter to some other things you might be hearing in our industry. But I'm telling you, if you do some of the same research that I did, that's really where we are. So focus on the good parts of the business, focus on where the inventory is, and you'll be doing just fine. I mean, we closed I think 8 or 9 in January. We've got three more that are on their way to closing right now, and it's good inventory levels. So.
That's good. Yeah, I mean, like I said when I was speaking to a gentleman yesterday, day before, he was just hell bent on, well, everybody says. I said, well, that's not everybody says there's a ton of non-performing out there. I mean,
Yeah.
why would you want to pay something that's non-performing that's priced just as high as a performing asset? It doesn't make any sense. I'm not
Right.
saying that you can't find any, and you're not saying that as well. It's just where's the best value? Would I rather have somebody that's been there, maybe had a modification once or twice, if that's the situation, but they're constantly paying, so be it, versus, hey, I got to go to foreclosure. I'm going to have all these problems, but yet you're paying the same for the asset. It just doesn't make any sense.
Right. And, I've made offers on non-performing loans, everybody,
Yeah,
okay? Because a lot of non-performing loans, they don't price them. They just say make an offer.
mm,
My offers all got rejected.
that's
And I
right.
know people in the industry, and I know people who are selling those notes. And I even called them up and said,
What gives?
hey, what do you need on this thing? I've seen this thing. You've tried to sell it 2 times, over the last 6 months, and you got no buyers. I would buy this. Where are you guys at? What's your bottom line? And we were miles apart. I mean, tens of thousands of dollars apart. And I'm just like, there's absolutely no, think about this. I said, there's no way I could buy that and make any money on the thing, or my margin would be so razor thin, it's not worth the risk,
That's right.
and they're just like, well, that's what we gotta, we gotta make money on these and we gotta, I'm like, well, you ain't gonna make it for me. Because
Yeah.
I know where that's going. So be careful out there on that. But you want to learn more about all this, everybody, just join us at the Real Estate Without Renters. You can go to kevinshortell.com. You can set an appointment with Dwayne. You can read about the various programs that we offer on all different levels, from education to full partnerships. So we've got any full service to self-service, with my assistants, and we can help you with all these things to navigate these. And once again, a lot comes through experience. You can compress your learning curve, because I think I've showed the PowerPoint one time. I probably need to do this more. I start showing everybody all the presidents since Ronald Reagan, and my point being that I've been in the note business throughout all of this. So I don't really care who's in there, all different cycles in the economy, and you have to learn how to adapt, and you need to really understand the marketplace. And I try to give you a glimpse of that today, of what's really going on, and keep within the good part, of where you should be at any time. So go to kevinshortell.com and let us know. And if you like the show, let us know on Facebook and everything too. And we would appreciate that. Any comments that you have as well. Dwayne, you got anything?
Good stuff. No, no, good stuff. I think it was definitely needed to be a topic to talk about because we are starting to see a little bit more chatter. Obviously, New Year, halfway through the first quarter, and people are realizing that they didn't pull the trigger last year, needing to make decisions this year. And I think the information that you're pushing out, due diligence wise, confirming what is all being said, that let's face it, there's a lot of people that don't do enough due diligence, and they're trusting in what people are telling them. And unfortunately, there are some out there that just are talking old information in today's world. So
You got it.
yeah.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in, and do appreciate it. And we'll see you next Wednesday.